Now, because we have so many videos where we talk about the importance of proper bile flow and the wide variety of health issues and symptoms that can come about when bile is not flowing correctly, I also hear from people to say, hey, I was told that I'm making too much bile. What do I do if I have this overactive gallbladder? Like it's an overachiever. It works way too well. I gotta like smack it around just to get it to calm down a little bit. What do I do in that situation? So in this video, I'm going to help you understand some apparent confusion that seems to come about with this situation, along with things that you can look at for yourself to figure out what steps might help you the most. You don't want to miss this.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So it was over on our video for Can Gallbladder Problems Cause Acid Reflux that Super Boaster something or other asked, hey thanks, but what if the problem is that the gallbladder is making too much bile? Wife had hiatal hernia, but she is experiencing pain that indicates a possible gallbladder issue. She has no diarrhea, but constipation due to her irritable bowel syndrome. So this is a common question. We get this a lot. This can actually be called biliary hyperkinesia, or maybe it's a situation where they feel like there's too much bile, or the gallbladder is making too much bile and creating all these problems. And I'm not a doctor. I don't know Super Biberman or whatever that was, or his wife's situation, so I can't possibly give them advice. I just want to share some studies that I found that can give us some indication that are they looking at this the wrong way. And the first study that I want to touch on is this one here, the biliary hyperkinesia, a new diagnosis or misunderstood pathophysiology of dyskinesia, a case report. And basically they kind of looked at the fact that, well, they kind of view this hyperkinesia issue when they do these HITA scans and they show that the gallbladder is working extraordinarily well, but the patient is still having this upper right quadrant pain that indicates gallbladder pain. So a lot of times when they're looking at this area here, they'll do what's called this HITA scan to see, are there blockages, are there stones that might be blocking something that's creating this pain, or is there a reason that shows us, oh, if we just take this gallbladder out and chunk it in the trash, that everything's going to get a whole lot better. And this study that I just showed you, and I'm going to put the links to all these studies in the description below so you can dig a little bit deeper into this and you don't have to just listen to me. And they said in this study, when that gallbladder ejection fraction is below 35%, that's usually a sign of trouble. And that's probably what's creating that pain. And if we remove the gallbladder, then those symptoms almost always go away. But this study was saying that what we found is that even when the gallbladder appears to be working well, when they're having this pain, we'll yank it out and toss it in the trash anyways. And it improves the symptoms in that situation as well. The problem is, this does stuff. Like Mother Nature wasn't an idiot when she put that gallbladder there. It really does stuff. And when you take it out, it can drastically change the way that digestion functions. And the confusing part is that it doesn't change for everybody. A lot of people, like probably half or more of the people that have their gallbladder removed are just fine afterwards and they don't have a lot of trouble. But if you want to see the trouble that some people have, just go to any of our videos on steps to take after gallbladder removal or anything about gallbladder pain or any of those things, and you'll just hear from person under the comments, oh yeah, I had my gallbladder removed 15 years ago, I've never been the same, I spend more on toilet paper than I do anything else. Like the complaints are almost unbelievable. And when you understand what this little structure does, you understand how removing it can really create a lot of trouble. And we have a lot of videos on that. If you want to learn more about that, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on how digestion changes after gallbladder removal so you can dig in and understand that a little bit better. But to get an idea of why would a person be having this pain if the gallbladder is working? The HITA scans showed that their ejection rate may have even been high. In that one study, the person had an ejection rate that was like 96% or something. So when they see that high rate, they'll call that a hyperkinesia. of that biliary pathway. And what we want to understand is that when there's pain, there's usually some kind of blockage or restriction in the gallbladder. And one of the gallbladder's jobs is to concentrate the bile that is made by the liver and sent down this biliary pathway to be stored in the gallbladder. That bile is really important to help us digest our food correctly. So the gallbladder's job is to concentrate it so that a small amount can then be more effective. But when it gets too concentrated in there or bile is not flowing correctly, which can happen for a wide variety of reasons. So if it's not flowing out like it should, it will stay in the gallbladder and then the gallbladder just continues to concentrate it. That's its job. My job is to concentrate things. It continues to concentrate it until it concentrates into sludge or even stones. And then this is not moving correctly. And then you'll see a really low extraction rate. And oh man, all that pain makes sense. Let's yank that out and you're going to feel better. But when they're running this HITA scan, we have a person, oh, I have this pain, indicating that there's some kind of non-movement there that's creating that pain in the gallbladder. But we do the scan and everything looks great. Well, what they do in this scan is they stimulate the gallbladder with what's called cholecystokinin. And this is made by the body. And when this is produced, it triggers this gallbladder to let the bile come down. So when we're testing how the gallbladder works, we're going to use this cholecystokinin just like the body does to give us a good indication of how well it's working. So we put this in there, it triggers the gallbladder. Wow, it's working great. So it is working fine. What's your problem? What are you complaining about? The problem is they don't look at the fact that the cholecystokinin is triggered in the body by things like stomach acid. So we look at this study here that says duodenal acidification releases cholecystokinin. And what that means is in the stomach here, when we eat food, the stomach should make HCl or hydrochloric acid to help acidify that food so that it breaks down. And then once that food is acidified correctly, it'll leave the stomach and come down here into the duodenum. And once that acidity is there, that's what triggers the cholecystokinin production. Okay, so we're looking at this study that says duodenal acidification releases cholecystokinin. I'll put that in the description below. But to show you that how widely this information is available to us, we can look in just like an encyclopedia. And here in the Britannica it says cholecystokinin is secreted by cells of the upper small intestine, which is that duodenal area. Its secretion is stimulated by the introduction of hydrochloric acid, amino acids, or fatty acids into the stomach or duodenum. Cholecystokinin stimulates the gallbladder to contract and release stored bile into the intestines. So what we need to have happen is we need to come down here into the duodenum. We need either stomach acid, amino acids. Amino acids are what come from breaking down protein. Well, guess what? We need stomach acid to break down protein into those amino acids. So we need stomach acid for those two things to trigger it here. Or fatty acids can come down and also kind of trigger this cholecystokinin. The problem is when someone's having gallbladder pain, the first thing that they're told is, oh, well, just go on a low-fat diet. It's the fat that's triggering that pain. Just don't eat any fats and you're going to be golden. So now we're not stimulating it at all. The bile is staying in the gallbladder even longer, concentrating even more and creating more and more trouble. But you can see that they're testing the gallbladder function by using the second step. What happens if the person is missing that first step that when they're not being tested is supposed to trigger the cholecystokinin? What if they're not making enough stomach acid? This is very common. Millions of people turn off their stomach acid on purpose every day. But even if they're not taking some type of medication that turns off stomach acid, they still have the ability to not be making enough for a wide variety of reasons. And when we're looking at these folks with the higher ejection rates, well, if this stomach acid is not working correctly and the gallbladder isn't really being called on very often, then wouldn't it make sense when you kind of triggered it with this cholecystokinin, then maybe a whole lot more would come out of the gallbladder and it would look like, oh wow, the gallbladder works really great. Look at all this stuff coming out because it had been holding on for some and just waiting to be called on. Oh, I'm finally called on. I'm going to really get some out of here. Is that what's happening in that situation? I don't know, but that does kind of make sense. So when we're looking at issues that are going to come up with restricted bile flow in that gallbladder, one of the biggest ones is a lack of stomach acid. And we look here at this study just so that you can see that I didn't get this information from a Paw Patrol coloring book. This information is available in the medical literature. And we look at this study, association between regular use of gastric acid suppressants and subsequent risk of cholestasis. And what this study showed was that someone was using something to restrict that stomach acid, whether it was a PPI or some type of neutralizing agent to neutralize those gastric acids, like some type of antacid type of thing. That what would happen is that there was an increased risk of having trouble with that proper bile flow, where they would get that cholestasis where the bile became too thick and sticky or sludgy to move correctly. And it makes sense since the gallbladder was not being called on due to the lack of stomach acid. And to take this a step further, I'll also share this study of omeprazole induces altered bile acid metabolism. And omeprazole is basically a PPI. PPIs are very commonly used to help with acid reflux symptoms. And we'll put a link in the description below on our video on why do I have acid reflux. A lot of people don't understand why that's actually happening and ways they can correct that without turning off stomach acid even more. And to dig into this study, we want to look at these bile issues because a lot of times the people with this issue are going to have the symptom of a gallbladder pain, but they may also have bile acid diarrhea or BAM kind of situations. And these situations are usually created by the lack of HCl or some type of bacterial overgrowth either in the stomach or the small intestine, altered bile acids, or just the bile having a different structure. So when we look at this study here about the omeprazole, they say that we formulated the following hypothesis: increased bile acid deconjugation in the jejunum of patients receiving omeprazole occurs due to bacterial overgrowth in the jejunum induced by gastric hypochlorhydria. So basically, when we're looking at some type of overgrowth in the stomach, like an H. pylori or just some type of overgrowth that gets in, it usually gets in because there's not enough stomach acid to fry these bad guys that are coming in on the food that we're eating. That acid is not just there to help us acidify and break down the food, it's also the barrier to the whole digestive tract. Anything that comes in should die in an acid bath. So that study is explaining to us that when there's not enough stomach acid due to this hypochlorhydria, that's the name for a lack of stomach acid, the bad guys come in, they create this overgrowth, and then that alters the structure of that bile acid. We create this altered bile acids, and the altered bile acids create a lot of trouble that can create this diarrhea or other discomforts. So in a lot of cases when bile is causing trouble like this, they'll tell the person, oh, you have too much bile. You need to calm down your bile. We're going to give you like a bile sequestrant to kind of reduce the amount of bile and change the trouble that it's creating. So a lot of times it's the bile being blamed for other things up here that are going wrong. When we read further into this study, we see them say, our data show bacterial overgrowth in the stomach and jejunum of patients with gastric ulcer and in healthy volunteers after treatment with omeprazole. So even with people that were healthy, once you treat them with a PPI and turn off their stomach acid, that they would see similar results as the people who didn't have the stomach acid and allowed those overgrowths to come in the first place. But they go on to say that these bacteria alter the metabolism of bile acids and induce malabsorption. So a lot of these people that deal with like bile acid diarrhea, they're saying, oh, it's just not getting absorbed correctly, and then this bile is creating all of this trouble. But the reality is that whether this trouble is coming from the overgrowth that came in due to the lack of stomach acid, or it could be coming just from the lack of stomach acid. When we see like green stool come out, green stool is an indication that there's bile that is not being altered the way that it should. Bile is a green substance. But when bile mixes with this stomach acid, then it changes the structure of that bile. And it also triggers all these other things like enzymes and bicarb and all these other things that help us really digest our food and then help the good bacteria in our gut continue to work on that bile and the other food that is being digested and changing the structure of that. But without that acid, it's going down here just like bile. And bile leans on that alkaline side, and alkaline substances can irritate this intestinal lining in the same way that something's too acidic. So a lot of times when things are going wrong, it's because one or both of these sides aren't working correctly. But if the stomach acid is working great, but there's not enough bile flow, we'll see things like chronic diarrhea just because it's too acidic here. It didn't get neutralized by the bile and these other, bicarb and other things that get triggered when the bile gets triggered. So it's like the first hammer is not being dropped and then everything else just starts to cause trouble down the line. It's similar if somebody doesn't have stomach acid but they have plenty of bile flow. Now we have this bile that didn't change into the way that it's supposed to be inside that intestinal tract. It's still in that state where it exists like it does in the gallbladder. Well, that's going to cause trouble down here. And another thing to think about is fiber. Somebody didn't write fiber here. Who's going to get fired? I wrote those. It's fine. But fiber can be important to look at because when there's not enough fiber moving through that intestinal tract, then it won't sweep enough of that bile that's been polluted. A lot of the junk that the liver filters out of the body, it puts into that bile, so as the bile moves through here, helping us digest our food, it's also carrying the toxins that can go out the back door when we poop like a champion. That's the body's main detox pathway. So when bile isn't flowing correctly, the body can't detox correctly, and when there's not enough fiber to push all that toxified bile through the system, and that's why we see our stool is darker when bile is flowing correctly, then all those toxins don't get pushed out. And then when the bile gets recycled, because the body recycles a lot of those bile acids, too much of it can get recycled, and now the bile is getting junkier and junkier, and as it moves through, it can also create symptoms. So fiber can be important in that regard. So if somebody's doing a carnivore diet that doesn't have a whole lot of fiber in it, and they're having troubles like this, they may need to change that a little bit. Now, I use carnivore diet from time to time. I use carnivore with clients, so I am a fan of the carnivore diet. I don't want you to freak out and say, man, you're talking about the carnivore diet bad. We're going to blow up your house. That's not what we're saying here. The carnivore diet can bring a lot of really beneficial situations for a lot of people, but the reality is there is no diet that is right for every person, and it's never going to happen. It's never going to exist. So get off your carnivore high horse a little bit, and you don't have to typity-type all this stuff. I tell people that, wearing slacks while you're water skiing is probably not optimal. And I hear, I wore slacks just yesterday, and I've been water skiing since I was 7. It's not really the same thing. Just understand that there's downsides and upsides to pretty much every diet out there. So if someone's not getting enough fiber and they're having this problem of, it seems like I have too much bile, they might want to use some fiber to help push some of that old bile out the system and cause the body to need to make more new fresh bile. So when we're looking at, what do I do? This was a lot of stuff. That's a little bit confusing. How do I know what steps I'm supposed to take? Well, the first thing you want to know is your bile flowing correctly? Is it moving through like it should? Because if it's too thick and sticky to flow correctly, that's going to create a lot of that pain and that's going to create a lot of trouble. We'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can get an idea if that might be an issue for you. And then we need to think about if it's not flowing so great, maybe are these other triggers not happening? We need these triggers to happen to trigger the bile to flow correctly. So if the HCl production is not working correctly, that's going to be the biggest deal. That seems to be the most common problem when we're seeing someone saying, I'm making too much bile. When I've had clients come to me that thought that they were making too much bile, we found that they weren't making enough stomach acid. And when you put the stomach acid in there and help them acidify their food correctly, all of a sudden the acid would change the structure of that bile into something that the body was expecting to see. And then of course if there's an overgrowth there, that seems to be creating other troubles that we see from that study as well. But again, the overgrowth is usually there due to a lack of stomach acid. And if you do have an overgrowth, we'll put a video in the link below for our video about SIBO to kind of help you understand steps to kind of get rid of that situation. But you can see that the solution is it's not going to be the same for everybody. Sorry, I can't just tell you, just take this capsule. Great job, you're going to knock it out. You got to see what's going on with you. It's about working with your body instead of just trying to fix a symptom by using a remedy. You need to see what's going wrong, address that, and if you can correct that, does it improve this issue for you? I don't know. You got to let us know how it goes. It's really going to be different for every person. But what's nice is when we look at these studies and when we look at the information that we know about how the body works, This problem makes sense for a lot of people. And when something makes sense, then you can just address the underlying cause and often see some improvement. So I hope that helps, and if you want to look right now to see am I making enough stomach acid or not, since that appears to be a really big deal with this issue, you can jump over and check out our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid to see if you need to address that issue. I can't wait to hear about your results.